Brilliant. Okay, there's a lovely number of people in, so welcome everybody and thank you for coming in. For those who have just joined us, do use the chat box to ask any questions. Do please keep yourselves on mute, and also just to let you know that this session is being recorded. So thank you very much for coming along, everybody. Hope everyone's well on this. Well, it's wet and miserable in Manchester, but hopefully it's slightly drier and warmer wherever you are. So I'm Rebecca Harvey. I'm editor of Co-op News. And with me today is Sarah Aldred, who is head of international partnerships of the Co-op College, who a lot of you will probably know already. So for those of you who don't know, Co-op News is a magazine about and for the global co-op movement, and the college is the educational arm of the co-op movement in the UK and internationally. And together these organisations, along with others like Co-op UK, Central England and the Co-op Group, have been putting on different events over the years to encourage and support women, because from the very first, like when co-ops first started, the co-op movement has led the way in campaigning for gender equality, and there's been many varied and inspirational women working in the co-op movement who are proud of their roles and are working for a sector that has very, very clear values and principles. And the Co-op Women's Challenge grew out of that, and it started about 9 years ago in Manchester. And it was designed to empower women working in the co-op movement. So how can women support each other? How can we build confidence? And how can we ensure a healthy work-life balance? So to answer some of these questions, Sarah and I started up these monthly webinars, Co-op Women's Voices, to hear the voices of women in the movement and speaking to some of the amazing women to be found in the co-op movement, not just in the UK, but around the world as well. So I'm delighted to welcome Debbie Robinson with us today. So Debbie is CEO of Central England, and I'm not going to say much more than that because she's got such an amazing story. I'm going to let Sarah tease out her story and her life through her questions. So as I said, please do use the chat box and enjoy the next hour of conversation.
Thanks, Bex, and just welcome everybody. You know, I mean, me and Bex are absolutely loving doing these interviews, and we're absolutely delighted today to kind of have Debbie Robinson with us. So, Debbie, I know we had a pre-brief last week, but the plan today is I've got a loose list of questions, but the purpose today is just to let Debbie talk. So, Debbie, welcome. And if we can start with the first question, really, which is really, what started you on your cooperative journey, and how did you first hear about cooperatives?
Oh, thank you, and hello everyone. I hope that you're all feeling well, and thank you to Rebecca and Sarah. Thank you for keeping us informed about what's going on throughout the global cooperative movement during what's been really difficult times, but also, you know, for helping us, particularly in terms of moving the cooperative agenda on. So that's, you know, particularly to a project and something that we're looking at in Malawi. So thank you all for that. But where did it start for me in terms of the co-op? Well, I'm a lifelong co-operator, so I grew up with it. There was a little co-op on the end of the street where my nana lived, and it was the shop that I was allowed to go to on my own with a little bit of independence and get things for my nana. So it's always been a really big important part of my life, and I think the element of self-responsibility has always been a really big attraction. It's always been really, what can you do? And you know, so often people really do want to do something and they don't know how to. You know, they'd love to help, they'd love to support projects, but actually the co-op is a brilliant gateway through membership into actually making a difference.
Wonderful, thanks. And so stepping back then to your childhood, and so when you were young, you know, because the purpose of these events really is for women, because you're a role model, Debbie, you know, and it's and you're just for other women to go, you know, who is this woman and what was your journey? So when you were young, you know, who influenced you when you were young? Was it you know, friends, teachers, your parents, you know, who were the people that were key in your life from childhood, really, I guess?
Oh, well, thank you. I've been blessed. I've got an absolutely brilliant mum, and she's still around, which is even better. I had an amazing nana. I've got brilliant sisters. I have a lovely daughter. Now I've got a granddaughter as well. So I feel really blessed at having had and still having so many really positive female influences. in my life. But I've also had that in terms of friends at school, and I still have friends from primary school like Claire Entwistle, who's just absolutely brilliant. And then in terms of secondary school as well, you know, Sarah Dodd, who's a High Court judge, and just I've been blessed really with people that have gone on to do really brilliant things in their life. But I wanted to say a little bit about the start of my life, and because Rebecca, Sarah and I had a chance to sort of catch up on this. I, along with thousands of other babies in the 60s, was taken away from my natural birth mother and put into care. And that was a really common thing at the time. And it's something that actually hasn't, it's had nothing but a positive effect on me, probably because I was placed with a wonderful, loving family in Burnley in Lancashire. And I knew all along that I wasn't theirs, and mum and dad had their own children and did adopt other children as well. But I always felt loved, I always felt supported, and almost that, you know, things happen in life, but really you can determine the journey that you actually want. And probably the biggest learning for me is to seize every opportunity that is available to you. And sometimes it feels like you've got a lot on and you think, oh, you know, I don't know if I can manage to do that. But opportunities come along and they're actually fairly rare. And if you don't take them, if you don't seize the moment, they will pass you by. And then you will regret having missed that opportunity. So, you know, I certainly, for me, and the positive influences in my life, it's always been, let's do this. Let's really just seize the moment. And I think that is really important for everyone, but I think especially for women, because we sometimes put things off because we think we have too many things to deal with. But our capacity is immense. So just make the most of it.
Thanks, Debbie, and we're delighted that you've mentioned. We weren't sure you were going to mention it, but we were absolutely delighted you mentioned about, you know, kind of about your experience really of adoption and care and things, because it's just you know, it's a narrative that people need to hear, you know, and it's really common. So, and we were just ultra impressed with you, Debbie, when you were talking about that last week. And if anyone's got any, you know, but there again in the chat function, you know, if anyone's got any follow-up questions, please do put them in the chat and we'll kind of feed them through. And just so where were you brought up, Debbie? Where's home for you? Where were you? Are you a northern girl, or are you?
Oh, I don't think I hide that very well, do I? Yeah, so I was brought up in Burnley in Lancashire with a really loving, close family, but then a big extended family as well. And I mean, I think that's another factor in life. When I was growing up, Burnley was an ordinary working town where people were decent and they worked hard, and, you know, we had a good life. And I have nothing but positive memories and experiences of Townley Hall, Pendle Hill, the beautiful countryside. But what I did start to witness, and this will happen to many people, is really in the 70s, when manufacturing and production was taken away from the town. It really did start to suffer. And certainly I go back most weekends. I go back to see my mum. We, you know, we'll have a little walk around the town centre. And architecturally, it's beautiful. It's built of stone. In fact, it's the Bath of the North, or Bath. I mean, the place near Bristol, just for anybody that's in any doubt at all. And it is surrounded by beautiful countryside and the River Brun that runs through it. And it gets such a bad press. So certainly is. Many of my friends, you know, we really try to do what we can to support the town, and I think that's really important, you know, for all of us. But there are things that have happened there, and they do have an impact on you. So the school that I went to, St Hilda's, that was an all-girls comprehensive school, was absolutely brilliant. but it's been knocked down, and there's this modern version has appeared, and they changed all of the school system, and as a result there were no children in that school anymore, and that's, you know, that's really quite sad. The ballet school that I went to, Joyce Heap School of Dancing, that's been knocked down as well. The first house that I lived in has been knocked down. And I think what's important is that we don't try to remove history, but actually we should always try to invest in it and bring it back to the standard that it was. And that's something that I think is brilliant about the cooperative movement, because whichever town or city you're in, you'll see a beautiful looking shop. It might now be a DIY centre or a tattoo parlour, but actually behind it will be a branch number. And the co-ops were right at the centre of every town and city, and were architecturally the highest quality and standards. And that's what we're doing at the moment in Central England Co-op, is looking at our estate and our stores and reinvesting, and that has worked really, really well for us. So one of our stores near Lichfield, it's in a housing estate called Bowley Park, and it just looks absolutely great. And what has happened is the whole community has raised their standards because of the investment that the co-ops actually made in their community. So we now have a fair trade community cafe, and I was there actually yesterday evening, and it was absolutely buzzing. So I do really care passionately about our roots as individuals, but the roots of the businesses in which we operate, and especially within the cooperative movement. And I feel that we should all be duty bound to do our best to keep those standards, those memories, and the vibrancy alive.
Thanks, Debbie. And the reason I ask about, you know, work, because I do think, you know, the place you grow up in, it does shape you, you know, and also Northern women as well. You know, it's just a nice kind of, it's just good to hear, you know, those kind of different stories. So I'm going to take you, Debbie, through to teenage and early adulthood. So because we were talking about this last week, and it's fascinating. Me and Bex got on going, this woman is incredible. So how did your teenage years and your early adult years shape you? You know, and you talk with us anyway quite a lot about the travel as influence. So could you just share some of those stories with us about, you know, what shaped you in your teenage and early adult years?
Sure, but I mean, I want to start off saying we're all incredible, and our capability is absolutely immense, and probably sort of beyond my teenage years. And if you don't mind, I'll just talk a little bit about that first, because I actually looked at so many people in the workplace, and I actually thought, if they can do it, I can do it. But now I actually think, if I can do it, anybody can do it. And I really do believe that. So as a teenager, being at a school I've already described, so it was all girls, an all girls school, and I loved it. My favourite subjects were art and PE. I just loved being outside and would play on any team or just do any sport whatsoever. So if it was cross country, I'd have my hand up, because I thought Wednesday afternoon, yeah, that'll be great. At least I'll get to go outside. And we had a PE teacher, Mrs. Hurst, and she was kind. And I want to stress the importance of kindness, and that's not being weak or soft, and we should never confuse those, because she was tough. She was an archetypal female PE teacher. You know, she put us through our drills, and she blew the whistle many times, and you know, she really did have a good control, but she could see potential in people, and she took enormous joy and pleasure at actually seeing people fulfill their potential. And that is something that has stayed with me, and it's to spot talent, and it's absolutely everywhere, and it's to encourage people to excel and actually practice that talent and be absolutely brilliant at it. And I felt that generally, both within education, is we sometimes try to just get better at the things that we're really quite rubbish at. So you can put a load of effort into something and you'll just become average. Or you can actually focus on the things that you're just naturally good at. And, you know, there are very, very talented people. And I think you should always pursue the things that you're good at. And you do kind of know, whether you were good at reading at school, you know whether maths was came easily to you, you knew if you could draw, you knew if you could run. And if you can do those things, because I think if we all try our best, then actually that's how society advances and moves forward. And what a year it has been for that progression and advancement around the Olympic Games and the Paralympic Games. Just those people that had to train in isolation wouldn't have been able to meet with their coaches and train in the way that they did, but the number of records that were broken. So they really did take an opportunity of a global pandemic and actually excel and accelerate and move things forward even more. And just last week, most of you will know that next year it's the Commonwealth Games and they're being held in Birmingham, and Birmingham is a really big, important cooperative city, and it's especially important to Central England Co-op. So I had the absolute privilege of being part of the planning. They were sharing the plans with us. And I met there with Ellie Simmons, the swimmer. She's just amazing, and even more amazing in real life than she comes across on the television. A formidable athlete, but the humility in her realisation that she'd come to the end of her Olympic swimming journey, but actually she's now embarking on a career in journalism and media. But she's also, as a volunteer on the Commonwealth Games Committee, working with businesses as to how we can have a legacy from the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham and inspire more people to participate in physical activity. So I just feel there's hardly a day in the week when I don't meet somebody that's just absolutely incredible and just amazing. And just with little conversations, we can achieve so much. So we are certainly looking at what we can do at Central England Co-op to make the most of the Commonwealth Games being held in Birmingham this year. But I also want to just talk a little bit about those teenage years, because they're tough, or they were certainly tough for me as a skinny ginger-haired kid with millions of freckles that always sort of felt on the edge of things and never quite with the in crowd, or just being able to be with the people that I thought were brilliant. And then I look at the people that really are brilliant, and they were the people who quietly got on with it, whether that was at school, whether it was in sport, and have excelled. And I had a really good friend, still have, Julie Cheetham, just a lovely, caring person who would make you feel comfortable. And I think there's a word that's used a lot, which is about women supporting women. And I think that is really, really important. But we shouldn't misconstrue support for agreeing with you. And I think sometimes when people are asking for support, they're almost imploring you to agree with them, when in actual fact, the best support that you can give is to talk things through with them. And perhaps you might end in a slightly different place than where you started. And I certainly, felt that was really important growing up. But I also had, wonderful male friends. I won't call them boyfriends, but friends who were male. And for me, especially, sport. And there was, Lee Ingham and Stuart Wolfendale. And they still involve me, even though I was awkward, if that makes sense. But I think in truth, many of us feel awkward, male, female, whatever gender or sexual orientation that we are. It feels difficult, and you really do need, you know, people around you that you can trust. And I think it's even more difficult now, because growing up in social media must be horrendous. I am just so glad, you know, I came before all of this, because I think it was just a little bit easier. But the things I did to sort of, I suppose in a way, get by, distract myself, but also get on in life, and so work's always been a really important part of my life. And like many people, I'm sure, on this call, I did a paper round at the age of 11. I managed to get the Sunday round, which was absolutely brilliant, because even though it weighed a ton, you got more wages for working on a Sunday. And if you didn't turn up, you didn't get paid, and that kind of seemed fair, because somebody had to go and deliver those papers. And I worked on a market stall, which I absolutely adored. And at that time, market stalls were set up beautifully. And I'd do pyramids of the oranges when they arrived in season, and made the most of all of the local produce. And I was a glass collector at Smackwater Jacks. So that's still owned. They haven't knocked that down. So I don't know what that says about society. But I'd highly recommend it if anybody's in Burnley. And then when I got to 18, I was able to work behind the bar, and you know, that was amazing. People watching, social skills. And again, seeing the sort of people quietly in the corner who would wait till there wasn't a queue at the bar to come and ask for a drink. And just really learning about people and getting involved. And I know I mentioned that earlier about seizing the moment. And for me, the getting involved in those sorts of formative years was an opportunity to go to Ghana, Burkina Faso and Upper Volta as a volunteer. And was I scared? A little bit, but I just thought, my goodness, I've got an opportunity to go to Africa. And when I say I've got an opportunity, I mean that the De La Salle brothers were running a trip, and what you had to do was to finance, and certainly I was doing the bits of jobs that I have described, but we certainly were not in a position where, you know, my family could have helped me afford to do this. So I did a skydive in order to raise the money to go, and I just went without hesitation. And I wanted to see what life was like in, you know, literally a very, very different world. And of course, I fell in love with Africa. I fell in love with the vastness of it. I fell in love with the beauty of the nature that is such a big part of it. And then I was utterly heartbroken at the lack of hope of the people that lived there, the lack of infrastructure, of access, and of real suppression. So that certainly had a massive lasting legacy on me. And I committed at that time to do whatever I could. And initially that was just making people aware that there was malnutrition and starvation in parts of Africa. Bearing in mind, this was the sort of very early 80s, before we started to have Live Aid and Band Aid and all of those things coming to fruition. But clearly I wasn't the only one that was struck. The whole world was just struck by what was happening around us. And that led really nicely into when I was working at the co-op. So this at that time it's working at the cooperative group. And then I suppose met like-minded people, and like Brad Hill and Terry Hudson, who could see that we found ourselves in positions where we could really make a difference, and make a massive difference. And I remember Brad talking about Cafe Direct, and this was the first sort of fair trade coffee. And we started to talk to people about this, but a lot of people didn't actually want to know. It was, we just need, when charity starts at home, and there's a lot of things to deal with here, but we don't grow coffee, we don't grow bananas here at home. So those arguments didn't really wash. And I think very quickly, along with the support of people like Malcolm Hepworth and John Bowes, people like Brad and Terry were able to absolutely pioneer different ways of doing business. And I've still got the photographs of projecting bananas onto the Houses of Parliament, onto buildings in Manchester, and a bit of a fuss was kicked up about saying, you haven't got planning permission, what if we get arrested? I was kind of saying, well, that'd be absolutely great, wouldn't it? They're going to handcuff us, and they're going to say, well, what's going on? Then we're going to be able to tell the story about fair trade bananas and the massive impact that has.
Yeah. Can I ask about, because I know we're really keen to take you to your professional life, and which is a lot of it has been in the cooperative movement. How has that shaped you working in the cooperative movement? And you're kind of talking about it now as well, actually, which is really rich. But what is it that makes it different being in the cooperative? Chief exec. What is it about being in the movement and working for a cooperative that has shaped you and is significant for you?
So certainly for me, from a personal perspective. So I worked at Co-op Group for 23 years. And it was actually that the co-op attracted some of the individuals that I've already mentioned, people that actually care, that in their working life want to do more than take home the salary, is to really, really make a difference. And to be quite frank, for a lot of the time I was at Co-op Group, it was in a little bit of disarray. But what you were able to do is to come up with ideas. So, working with Catherine Higgs in terms of nutrition and being instrumental in the traffic light system around food, nutrition, front of pack information, etc. I felt probably within the cooperative movement more than anywhere else that you could pursue some of these things. So it was the same in terms of testing health and beauty and household products on animals. As a student in Manchester, it was at the time that there were dozens of fur coat shops in Manchester, would you believe? But there were plenty of them on Deansgate. And people would, throw bricks through the windows and pour red paint on anyone who dared to wear a fur coat. And what was happening in the cooperative movement at the time, we were talking about those things and trying to find ways that we could, make a difference. And there were people like Ruth Barnhill and Wendy Wrigley who would really help us. And at the time, that the likes of Terry, Brad, and we were like the youngsters, and we were kind of out there. And even now, my own daughter, says, "You are the children of the revolution." And we had, so much energy around campaigning. And I think that's what the cooperative movement is all about, is campaigning. And campaigning is looking for sustainable and systemic change, and not giving up until you've achieved that. It's not a sort of 6 weeks campaign. It's really about understanding what the issues are and making a fundamental difference. So I have to say I was unceremoniously thrown out of the cooperative group in 2010, at the beginning of 2010. And I took it hard, to be honest, but it wasn't about the job. It was about not being able to pursue these really important issues and make a significant difference in my working life. So when an opportunity came around, which I never expected, I went through all of the grieving process of no longer being part of the cooperative movement, but to be approached by Central England Co-op. And at first I had some of that fear, and I thought, oh gosh, I'm going to have to face into the people and the situation that led to me being removed from cooperative group. That's going to be really, really hard. And I had a great job. I was the managing director of SPAR, a brilliant organisation. Not a lot is known about it. It's ostensibly family businesses. It's incredibly entrepreneurial and does brilliant things for the communities in which it serves. But the draw of being able to go back into the cooperative movement proved too strong. And the fact that it was Central England Co-op, which is a truly cooperative society, so it still pays a dividend. Membership is fundamental to its success and is a huge part of the future. Not least of which, it has an amazing board, and many of them are really well known to you, of some brilliant women and really amazing men as well. So to be able to go back into that, and obviously the issues of today are very different from the issues that we were facing into in the 80s as you were starting out in your working life. So I'd like to think that in a small way we've helped change around animal testing. I'd like to think that we've helped raise the standards of animal welfare and husbandry in the food industry, and that we help put fair trade on the map, and for people to understand the plight and the work that goes into producing things that we take for granted. So simple products like the tea and coffee, bananas, and not so simple but absolutely delicious chocolate. But I do feel that fair trade is an area possibly where the Fair Trade Foundation has done a brilliant job. But other retailers, unfortunately, felt they could do things themselves and go in a different direction. So as a result of that, at Central England Co-op, we're trying to resurrect, we're getting support from the college. And I've got my mates, I've got Brad on the case, because of course he's still so well connected on the ground, and the fact is we're doing some work in Malawi, and Malawi is the 5th poorest country in the world, yet it has one of the top netball teams in the world. So it's a beautiful opportunity for the whole of the cooperative movement on a global level to come together, because Brad and I were in Malawi many years ago, and it was probably one of the most heartbreaking trips I've ever made. And we managed to, we went to 5 African states in 5 days, and we were in Lesotho and South Africa looking at many of the fair trade projects that were really, really flourishing. And in that journey, we had learned that at a time when Tesco was giving computers out, we saw that children were dying. So we started the work with the One Water Foundation and the wonderful Duncan Goose to put play pumps in that would provide water. And then after water was sanitation, after sanitation was food, after food was healthcare, and then education came next. And I know some of the projects, so particularly Kwapa Cocoa in Ghana, ended up just being like a cooperative town in its entirety. It was about empowering the communities for them to decide what was most important to them, not what we thought was important to them. And whole communities ended up with school uniforms, cycling into school. It was just magical the impact that it had had, you know. And I don't know how, you know, Brad feels, but, you know, he should just feel absolutely brilliant for the degree of change that has happened there. So back to Malawi, malnutrition, distended bellies, just like Ethiopia in the 80s, but it's tiny. It doesn't have the recognition that perhaps it needs. And of course, the irony is that Malawi produces high protein through nuts, peanuts, macadamia nuts, etc. And we're going to really work with Malawi as a country and really try to take as much product as we possibly can, because fair trade is about sustainable trade. It is not about aid. It is teaching them to fish and not giving them a fish. It really is fixing the problem for good. And there is the potential to take Malawi out of poverty. So what we're doing at Central England Co-op to get it off the ground is to make a contribution for every fair trade product that we sell to put into a fund. But what we're hoping, we think that we'll need to fund that for 3, possibly 5 years. But our objective is to make the project financially sustainable, humanly sustainable, and environmentally sustainable. So the community will be able to help itself, and that gives the dignity of work and the respect, and allows communities to build and help themselves. So I'm sorry, Steph, that was a really long answer.
And it's really, no, this is perfect. This is perfect. And this is what we kind of touched on last week. So this is, you know, and obviously, you know, Malawi, my reflection, because, you know, we're working closely, you know, with Central England at the college on this project. You know, it's radical what Central England are doing, you know, here, because, you know, they're investing in cooperative development as well. So, you know, it's actually, you know, you're also saying, you know, you need to empower the co-ops, however small, or, you know, and it's an unusual stance that a large UK cooperative retail society is taking around Principle 6, you know, and it's, for me, it's, you know, it's fantastic, you know, to see that, you know, and it is that solidarity in the Principle 6 in action, really. So from that lens, it's amazing. But Debbie, I'm going to come back to you again, and around the international, because you know, you talk about Malawi, and also you're also involved with other, you know, international movements, so like Euro Co-op, you know, and how important is that to you? You know, the co-op movement is, because I know you're really active you've got a strong international lens. So why is that, and why do you think that's important?
So I am on the Euro Co-ops board, and again, you know, I'm just been incredibly lucky. So a couple of weeks ago, I was in the Czech Republic for the board meeting. Obviously, it's been the first face-to-face board meeting for Euro Co-ops for some time, for obvious reasons. And it's really important because, I mean, there are sort of many myths and legends, but generally speaking, the cooperative movement started in Rochdale, and it was seen as a British movement. And I know that actually all over the world there were other cooperatives as well. I guess it was the organisation and the ability to spread the word that really started in Rochdale. So I'm sure there's many other co-ops that would claim first, as it were. But when you're together with cooperators, magic happens. And actually, just on that trip alone, we saw a coffee cup, which is used by the Bulgarian co-op, and it's edible. So it's just absolutely amazing. I saw it, I'm going, oh my gosh, how many Costa coffee cups do you see, and Starbucks coffee cups all over the place? It's nearly as bad as McDonald's from a litter perspective. Yeah. Just imagine if all co-ops had this edible coffee cup. So again, it's just this exchange of ideas and thinking. And I think that is a key difference with cooperatives, is that actually we're looking for the greater good, and therefore the ideation and the sharing of things that we know is crucially important. And I think to have a college. I mean, again, what other operator has its own college? And I was lucky enough to be able to go to Stamford Hall and to be trained there. And it's a kind of spiritual home, but it's an intellectual home as well. So the whole learning for me is absolutely crucial for the future success of the cooperative movement. And again, to have a free press, our own free press, and certainly during lockdown, I'm reading through, looking at what's happening in India, looking what's happening in the United States. It's amazing. And I find that just totally inspirational. And I think that certainly the UK is duty bound and has a real role in holding together the whole of the cooperative movement. And if I can do anything to support that by being involved in Euro Co-ops, I absolutely will. And I think it's also about being open and receptive to new ideas and not thinking that you know everything and that you have all the answers. And we should really see value in the organisation that we have around us and use it. So for the college, we've taken a decision that the college will be our first provider of all of our training needs within our society. Why wouldn't we? You know, why go to some other training agencies, all perfectly good? And I do a lot of work with the ACS, which is the Association of Convenience Stores, and the BRC, which is the British Retail Consortium. And they too have really great training, learning and educational aspects. And I'm hoping we're going to be able to knit all of that together, because the cooperative model and the cooperative business model, for me, should be on every business degree course. It should be part of the national curriculum. And I think there are so many young people who would be utterly delighted to know that they could set up and do something as a cooperative. It doesn't have to be a limited, well, you need to be limited for obvious reasons, but it doesn't have to be in the way that businesses normally start up. You know, they can have much richer environments. And when you're doing that on an international level, you just learn so much more. Economies are run differently in other countries, and you just pick up ideas and little gems. And it's certainly my intention to share the potential that we have in Malawi once that project is established with the rest of Euro Co-op. I'd love them to join in, because if they too looked at it as an incredibly small contribution towards creating co-ops on a global level, I think we'd be able to protect ourselves from the mess that we're in at the moment in terms of driver shortages and the impact of Brexit. This would really be around mobilising the cooperative movement in an incredibly sustainable way. And as a result, we will be protecting our members and our customers by giving them outstanding products and services, at the same time ensuring great working standards for people all over the world.
Thanks, Debbie. And it's interesting what's coming out there. I mean, curiosity is something that, you know, is really coming out from what you're saying. Just having having an international lens just does expand your level of curiosity. And I think the movement, my sense of the cooperative movement is it's a very curious movement, really, which leads to all kinds of good stuff. And also what I'm pulling out from you, Debbie, is, you know, you're constantly acknowledging all kinds of other people on your journey, which is fantastic. You know, it's the number of names you've actually mentioned throughout the past hour has been really significant, which segues me onto nearly the last question. So I've got one quick question before the last one, and then I'm conscious, because we could talk for hours with you, Debbie, because you're fascinating. So, but what about role models? You know, because the fundamental purpose of these is about interviewing role models, really. So what message would you give to younger women who, you know, are in this really mixed up world at the minute? You know, what message would you like to give to younger women who are looking at you and going, gosh, how she made it? You know, how does she deal with the world? So.
Yeah, I thought a lot about that, the whole role model question, Sarah, because you hear it quite a lot. You have to see it to be it. I actually don't subscribe to that, because I think I said fairly early on, I often, you know, looked at people and thought, gosh, if they're in that position, able to do that job, I certainly can. So I think there is something in your confidence and your self-belief in what you are capable of doing and what you are capable of achieving, and never underestimate that. But find people around you that have got similar ideas that you can share. And you know, I do think that is really important. But share the ideas, and actually be open to what the outcome might be. Because, you know, life is not a formula. There's stuff that is thrown at you left, right and centre. And I think this has come up quite a bit. My biggest advice is to take the opportunities that come your way when they come your way. Yeah. Because they don't come very often, and because you might live to regret it. So don't have any regrets, and be in the moment as well. And I think sometimes, and especially these days with social media, is we're somewhere, but we're somewhere else at the same time. And actually really being in the moment, and taking as much as you possibly can from that. And really importantly is that support for each other. And it's how you can find the people that you can trust, because you will be let down in life. You know, at all stages, there'll be people that you thought were your friends, that you thought they could trust, and you can't. So it's actually knowing when you have to give that up. And it's not about falling out with people or you know, anything like that. That's absolutely futile. But it is about knowing the people that are committed and will really, really make a difference. And sometimes people say, oh, they're a great role model, but they're so far off from where you are in life. You're never going to even get to meet them, let alone have a conversation with them. Yeah. So I honestly get, you know, inspiration from around me. You know, I have an amazing executive assistant, Kate Hunter. You know, I've got Jane Avery. I've got Elaine Dean. I've got people all around. We've just recruited Sarah Dickens. We've got Liz Robson. They're absolutely amazing women. And, you know, sometimes I think we miss that. So I don't think you have to look very far for inspiration and for role models, but do have a very open mind as to the people that you can really trust and that's going to help you. And actually not just help you, but it's actually help society move forward and progress. And it's not only women that do that. You know, there are brilliant men in the world, but the trust thing is the common thing right across the piece for me.
Thanks, Debbie. And gosh, yeah, I'm taking this because I'm conscious of time now, actually. So, and I want to get this last question in because we always do. But just thank you for it was just a really honest. You've just been really honest and authentic in your own story, Rachel, which has been brilliant. But this last question, because we ask everyone, so we've asked Helen, we've asked Elaine, we've asked. So, if you were stranded on a desert island, what 3 things would you take to sustain you?
Okay, I'd like a radio. That's a mega indulgence. Okay. I like listening to the World Service and I love my music. That's
a solar powered radio, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, or, you know, one of those manual wind up ones. I have one of those. I'd like to take a photo album. so I can just have all my happy memories and all my family and friends around me. And a cherry tree, because I just absolutely love cherries. They taste delicious. They're dead simple. I'd be able to make stuff out of the stones. I'd be able to use the stalks, and so I'd be able to just sit under my cherry tree, listening to the radio, looking at the pictures.
That's perfect. Honestly, we've had such diverse responses, and there again, we would never have guessed that. So that's brilliant. That's brilliant. We've got, thanks, Debbie, and I just want to, honestly, it's been a huge privilege. But we've got 5 minutes because I know you need to scoot at 11. So, but we've got a range of people here. So please do, there's 5 minutes left to kind of just ask any questions, or if you want to take your mic off and just say anything, because it's just been a really heartfelt kind of interview this morning. So yeah, so just that's thanks. And Bex, do you want to, I'm conscious I've just been gabbing with Debbie really. So Bex.
No, it's been really interesting listening to all. Debbie, thank you very much for making time for us today. One thing that really struck me is one of the things you said very early on was about how women's capacity is immense and you need to make the most of it. How do you think co-ops really help with that? Because for some women that's not an easy thing to do, to say yes, or to really put themselves out there for that. So how do co-ops like support and encourage and help people, or help women overcome those challenges and those blockers? Is there something special about co-ops that do that?
I think the specialness is the people in the co-op that of course make the co-op, so it's kind of a difficult thing to answer, but that's where your network is really important to support you as well. So having climbed the greasy pole with two children in tow, and they've both been amazing. I honestly felt that I was growing up with them, but they have been very understanding, and the long-suffering Andy, who's had a lot to put up with. For sure. I think what cooperatives should and can do more of is that the opportunities are available to everyone, and they don't just assume that if you are female, or if you have a family, or if you are a carer, or a whole host of, if you have a disability, that the opportunities aren't given to you. And I think that would apply anywhere, and perhaps co-ops are more inclusive in that respect, but I think they could be even more inclusive, and that we need to make necessary adaptations that actually allow people to participate fully.
Thanks, Debbie. No, that's a really good point. Thank you. We've had a couple of comments on, so thank you for everyone who's commented, whether it's like to everybody or in direct messages. Kareem, I will get back to you on your comment offline, so thank you for that message. Iram says, I feel really privileged to be in the presence of change makers and allowing me to listen to shared experiences. So significant thanks to you for that, and solidarity and peace. Thank you, Iram. And Joanna says, Debbie, what would you have done if you hadn't got involved in co-ops?
Oh, what a good, I think, well, I did want to be the curator of the Smithsonian Institute. So, not that I was setting my bar very high or anything, but I do love the arts and culture and creativity. And I think they're brilliant for physical and for mental health. And it has been a sector that has struggled massively during the pandemic. So I would say to any of you, don't buy a picture from a shop. Just find a local artist, and they really need it. And it's the same about going to a show or a play. Those things I think are absolutely life enhancing and are underestimated in terms of the contribution that they make to the how society progresses. The creative people see things in a different way and open up a whole world of wonderful opportunities.
Couldn't agree more, says Joanna. Brilliant. One question from me actually, because I know a lot of co-op societies used to have brass bands. Does Central England still have a brass band or an orchestra? Out of interest, I'm curious.
They've not asked me to play. I'm gutted. So there are still some, and it obviously Central England covers a massive geography. So and you know that our member activities are really diverse. So there are actually a number of bands, I think including a brass band, because I have been at one of our stalls. And so we're still really active in that regard.
Brilliant, thank you. And like one other, Elaine says, yes, we do have a brass band and a choral group. Excellent. As some people may know, it's the Internationally Cooperative Alliance's global conference coming up at the beginning of December, and the main theme there is cooperative identity and deepening the co-op identity. So one question for you, Debbie, is how would you define the cooperative identity? What does that mean to you?
So for me, it is the progression of society. That's what cooperatives do. Initially, we lifted people out of poverty. We put shoes on children's feet that had known nothing but clogs. And we put coats on men's and women's backs to give them dignity when all they had previously was a shawl. And I think it's crucial that we just think really progressively. And actually, where's our relevance? So things for me, and obviously we're doing a lot in terms of food poverty at Central England Co-op, but I think digital literacy and an inclusion is a crucial part of the identity of cooperatives, where everybody feels valued, respected and appreciated.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you. Bex, do you want to? Are you wrapping up or am I today?
I don't mind, Sarah. You can.
No, it's just to say thank you, Debbie. No, thanks, Debbie. And yeah, and it's been an absolute privilege. I know you need to scoot, but I just want to say on behalf of me and Bex and everybody in the room, just a huge thanks. It's been an absolute privilege to spend the time today.